Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Pranzata Podcast. This is your host, Andrea Pranzatelli. This is episode number 135 on the Pranzata Podcast on YouTube. Today is going to be a reaction video to the election results of 2024 with Donald Trump winning the election and Kamala Harris losing the election. Before we get into it, I just want to say if you like what you hear today, please don't forget to hit subscribe to this channel. It is my mission to become a full-time podcaster, and every single subscriber helps me get closer to reaching that goal. Okay, so I think it's fair to say that this was a very long week for the people in the United States. There was a very intense buildup of what was going to happen with this election. We were told for the longest time that it was going to be neck and neck. So because of that, there was a lot of hype, a lot of buildup, and a lot of suspense in this election. And I think it shocked America when they saw the results the next morning, or not even the next morning. As the night was progressing, it was becoming more and more evident that Donald Trump was going to win the election. But especially the next morning when people had a look at how red the map was in total. And not only that, but if you were to click on each state, I know on Google you can do this. If you just Google election results 2024, not only do you see the red over the country, but you can click on each individual state. And even within the states that are typically blue, if you click on them and you expand, like for example, New Jersey was a blue state. If you click on New Jersey and you expand that, you see how much red was actually in New Jersey as well. So it's fair to say not only did Donald Trump win, but he won by a landslide. I mean, I'm sure everybody knows this already, but he increased the margins on every single type of person. There was more women who voted for him this year compared to Joe Biden in the last election. There was more men, more Black men, more Hispanic men. It was just insane what he accomplished. And what I want to talk about on this episode is I want to give my opinion on how the country is reacting to this right now. And I also want to give my insight on why I think things went wrong for the Democratic Party this year. I actually do think I'm in a pretty good place right now to provide some insight on how we got here. Because again, so much of the country is in shock right now. And they're saying, this person was a convicted felon. He has a history of being compared to Hitler. You know, so many things about him, yet so much of the country went in the red direction. And again, like I was saying before, I do think I have a pretty good idea of how this happened because I myself, people who have been following my podcast know this, but I myself, when I was following the different campaigns in this election, I was even confused about who was the better candidate. So some people may or may not know that listen to this channel that during the first debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, that I left that debate feeling very confused. Believe it or not, despite all the cat and dog comments, I still left feeling confused about who was the stronger candidate. And then furthermore, as I continued to explore these two sides, because I spent a lot of time in the algorithms of both sides. And as I was spending time studying the left and studying the right, what their alleged policies were and what their promises were, even I myself was incredibly confused about who was going to be the better candidate to vote for this election. So when I had started posting these videos, I had gotten a lot of pushback from some friends who were genuinely confused about why I would be confused about who was the stronger candidate in this election. And because of that, I felt like, oh my God, what did I do? Am I crazy? Am I missing something? I felt very stupid. I didn't trust my ideas. I felt very isolated. But then after some time went by, I didn't just get pushback from some of my friends on the left. I got some people who were in the center reaching out to me and telling me privately, hey, I actually agree with the stuff you said on that podcast. I feel the same way too. I'm confused too. So when I started having those people reach out to me, that was a bit of a sigh of relief for me. I was like, okay, I can't be that crazy then if other people are thinking the same thing. And then after the election results came in, I'm like, okay, I'm definitely not crazy because clearly a lot of people went in the red direction. But with that being said, I do want to share with the listeners some of my insights on what some of these people told me who were in the center. Because I think right now, a lot of the people on the left are very angry about the election results, but in my opinion, I think they're angry at the wrong people. I think they should be angry at the Democrats, not the American people, because I feel right now people have this idea that anybody who voted for Donald Trump right now, the reason for that is because the country is built on so much racism and so much sexism. But what I found was that a lot of the people who were in the center this year who voted for Donald Trump, you would be shocked on what kinds of people voted for him. I mean, I guess you wouldn't be shocked because, like I said in the beginning of this episode, that he increased so many different margins of people. But gay people voted for him. Black people voted for him, women voted for him, people that were hardcore on the left that were now in the center voted for him. So many people that you would not expect voted for Donald Trump this year. And one of the biggest things that I'm hearing right now from them is that they didn't vote for Donald Trump because they like Donald Trump. They voted for Donald Trump because they were voting against the left, because they had become so fed up with the left. Now, that's not to say that there aren't obviously going to be some crazy people out there that voted for him for the reasons we said in the beginning. Of course, there's going to be a population of sexist people who don't want a woman president. Of course, there's going to be a small population of racist people that don't want a black president, etc. These things do exist. Of course, there's going to be crazy MAGA people who are so devoutly loyal to Donald Trump that he's their king. Of course, that exists as well. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is that's not the majority of what happened here. A huge, huge chunk of the population are normal people in the center, normal, nice people who, like me before, were incredibly confused about who to vote for this election. And after weighing things out in their head, they decided to go with Donald Trump. That is a huge, huge chunk of the population. And because of that, I'm seeing right now a lot of reactions from this election where people are cutting people off. I mean, on social media, I've seen a lot of things on Instagram where people were like, if you voted for Donald Trump, you can block me and unfollow me right now because now I know the kind of monster you are, stuff like that. Women are divorcing their husbands if they voted for Donald Trump. I mean, it is total mayhem right now in the political sphere of the United States. And from my opinion, I don't think that's productive because I think that that's actually how we got here in the first place. Because this division has been pushing people so far apart. And because of that, it's just causing things to get more extreme on both ends. And it sounds to me like a lot of the population who wants to be in the center found that this type of stuff was coming more from the left, of people saying, I'm going to cut you off if this, I'm going to cancel you if this. A lot of people who don't really want to pick a side, who want to stay in the center, felt so insulted by that they actually went to the right this year. And I know that's hard to hear and that might upset some people by me saying that, but I really mean this and I really believe this when I say that the more that happens, the more the country is just going to go into the right. So I think it's not a good idea to do that. I think it makes more sense to actually sit down with your friends and your family who voted for Donald Trump and actually try to understand the reasons why, so that the country doesn't continue moving into one extreme direction and we pull things back a little bit closer to the center. Also, I've heard some reactions from the public saying that they actually want to flee the country because of Donald Trump's win. But again, I don't think that's productive, because if there's something worth fighting for and you want to reverse some of the effects of this election, I think that it makes more sense to stay here and fight for the people that you feel are in danger. I don't think anybody in the United States right now is in such a vile, dangerous position that they have to flee the country immediately. I think right now there's enough freedom amongst the American people that it would make far more sense for people to stay in their country and fight for the people they love and care about instead of flee the country. Okay, so with that being said, I do want to give my talking points about what I've learned about studying both the left and the right this year. And for the people who are in shock about why we got here, I think I could tell you a little bit about why we got here. So the first point I want to make is about censorship. I think that censorship is one of the biggest reasons why we got here. Again, I had mentioned that on several of my previous episodes. My last episode, if this is episode 135, I said right. So my last episode 134 was a 2-hour conversation pretty much around censorship. And it was one of the reasons why I was confused about this election. So hear me out with this one. I know this is all sensitive right now, so I'm afraid that I'm going to upset people in a way, but I'm not trying to. I genuinely am just trying to bring things to a place where people could talk to each other and understand what's going on. So for me, censorship was something I was passionate about because, right now you're getting a lot of talk on the left that how could people dare vote in a direction that would take away human rights? And by the way, I agree with that. I was very upset about the right's push towards removing abortion as a legal option for women in some states. I was very upset, and why I was so conflicted. One of the reasons why I was so conflicted about this election, because that was something that I was like, yeah, I just don't agree with that. However, many people, including myself, also see censorship as a human right as well. So the argument can actually be made on both sides. While on the left, you're saying, how dare you try to threaten this fundamental freedom of women? You have the people on the right who equally, and again, you don't have to agree with it. You could say bullshit, freedom of speech isn't actually at risk. It's bullshit. But what you need to understand that's how most of the people in the center and to the right actually feel. They actually feel that freedom of speech is at risk, and they feel that human right is also at risk. So while the majority of the country does not want to take women's rights away from women, it seems like the majority of the country felt that the issue of censorship and free speech was more threatening than the issue of women's rights. As sad as that is to say, as angry as that might make some people listening to this, it is a truth. A lot of the country actually feels that way right now. They feel that free speech is at risk due to reasons that I talked about in the last episode, which is episode 134. I want to get to my other points on this episode, so I'm not going to go into a big conversation about why many Americans right now feel that free speech is at risk. So if you want to hear a greater explanation of that, then listen to episode 134. But in short, yes, that's one of my points on this list, is that censorship is a major issue and a concern for people right now in the United States. Okay, the second thing I put on my list here is that Kamala Harris was tied in with the Biden campaign, and many people lost trust in the Biden campaign. And because she was so closely tied with the Biden campaign, that pushed a lot of people away from the left this year. There's many reasons why the American people felt distrustful. To keep my point short and concise and to get onto the other points, I'm going to list one big one. I think that the whole situation with Biden's health really lost the trust of the American people, because the American people felt very gaslit by this situation, because people had been talking about Biden's health decline for a long time. And anytime somebody raised concern about it, a lot of the response you would hear from fellow Democrats or Biden supporters or the media itself would be something along the lines of, that's conspiracy, that's crazy, that's just Fox News trying to start rumors. That was a lot of the public response when people were raising concerns about Biden's health. But then by the time the debate happened with Biden and Donald Trump, it was glaringly obvious that there was something seriously wrong. There was absolutely no way of hiding it at this point. And initially, when that happened, a lot of the American people wanted Biden to step down right away after that. And even after that, it took several months for them to take that seriously and have him step down. I heard a lot of Democrats saying, well, what do you expect? How could Kamala Harris have won if she only had such a short time to prepare for her campaign? But the thing is, she could have had a lot longer time to prepare for her campaign if the Democratic Party had taken that seriously from day one. They could have had her in almost immediately, like a few days later or a week later. But instead, they still continued to gaslight the public and say, no, we're not taking Biden down. I mean, I myself actually saw an interview of Kamala Harris that was filmed shortly after the debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And Kamala Harris was being interviewed, and she was being asked questions about Biden's health, and she was being asked, "Are you concerned about Biden's health?" And Kamala straight up said to the camera, "Joe Biden is as great as he's ever been." Now, if that's not a gaslight to the American people, then what is? And I think what people need to understand is that while Trump has such a horrific record, that seeing the Biden administration be so dishonest about the health of Joe Biden and gaslight the American people as a result of that really lost the trust of the American people. So as crazy as this is, and as angry as this makes people feel, the truth is a lot of people felt, well, at least I know what I'm getting with Trump. He's an asshole, but at least I know what he is. A lot of people didn't know what Kamala was because of these lies that were told from the Biden administration. And a lot of people felt, well, how do I know she's actually who she's portraying herself to be? Because here's the thing. The image of Kamala Harris was amazing. I mean, she was joyful. She's beautiful. I mean, she's actually, I just found out this recently that she's 60 years old. And I was like, God damn, she is an absolute babe. Like, you know what I mean? 60 years old to look like that, you know? So she's, you know, again, she's joyful. She's beautiful. She wants to help the struggling American, etc. But because of the dishonesty that was said in the Biden campaign, not many people trusted that what they were seeing was actually what they were getting. So people felt more comfortable with a transparent asshole than they did with somebody that they don't really know the truth about, you know? So that's where I think things maybe turned to the red direction. That was a big thing, in my opinion, with her being tied so heavily with the Biden campaign. Okay, number 3. I think one of the reasons why people in the center who may have typically voted left went red this year is because Kamala Harris didn't go on the Joe Rogan podcast. I talk about the Joe Rogan podcast a lot on this podcast. And the reason for that is I don't think a lot of people are aware of the influence of podcasters. I don't know if people are aware that podcasting is basically the new news now. And with Joe Rogan being the most successful #1 podcast out there right now, he actually has more subscribers than CNN. And I think Fox too. I'm not sure 100% about Fox. He might have it equal with Fox or just about the same as Fox. But Joe Rogan's podcast, I'm pretty sure, definitely has more subscribers than CNN. And I believe also a slight margin of more subscribers than Fox does. That is huge because I think a lot of people don't realize that the mainstream media is no longer in the hands of these corporate media companies, that things are now in the hands of the people, which I actually think is a great thing. Some people are very angry at the fact that Joe Rogan's podcast is so popular, but to me, that's a great thing that people, the everyday American people, actually have the power in terms of media. Now, some people might think that's a dangerous thing, but I don't think that's a dangerous thing at all. I think that's a transparent thing. A lot of people have this idea that somehow these podcasters, if they're comedians or if they're everyday people, etc., they're not responsible enough, or they're not entitled to have these big conversations. But to me, that's actually very contradictory of what we've been saying for the longest time, is that the people need to be heard and not these rich politicians on TV. So it's like we finally got what we wanted and now we're mad about it. But anyways, that's besides the point. I'm getting too off track here. The point I'm trying to make is that her not going on the Joe Rogan podcast was catastrophic for the results of this election. And again, like I said in the beginning of the episode, that should piss her fans off, because the thing is, with podcasting being such a major influence on the American people, and the majority of the people in the center are paying attention to these podcasts now, just so people know, Donald Trump went on the Joe Rogan podcast, and a lot of people are angry about that. But the thing is, Joe Rogan made it very clear on his podcast that he wanted to interview both candidates. And he knew that it was going to be hard to get Kamala Harris on his podcast. So not only did he invite her on, but he invited her on and said that he wouldn't talk about policies. He just wanted to get to know her as a person. He would have talked about what does she eat, what does she do, on her free time, etc. Just fun, lighthearted stuff. And even with that being said, she put up all these stipulations about being on his podcast where she wouldn't go to his studio. She wanted him to fly to her studio, wherever she was at the time. and she only wanted a 45-minute podcast. Now, keep in mind that people who listen to podcasts, they want to hear a 2 or a 3-hour conversation. The reason why podcasts are so influential and so popular right now is because they feel like they're really getting the truth, because there's no editing. I mean, people want to hear everything on a podcast. They want to hear the awkward silences. They want to hear the burping. They want to hear the people saying, I have to go pee. Like, I mean, they want total transparency, and they don't feel like they're getting total transparency from the news. So I think that with Kamala Harris getting the opportunity to go on the Joe Rogan podcast and talk about nothing but fun stuff, and she refused to do that, not only should that piss off her followers and her supporters, but that should raise a red flag of concern to the American people, because it makes people feel like if she can't go on a podcast and have a conversation about basically nothing, about what does she do for fun and what does she like to eat and fun stuff, then what is she hiding? What does she have to hide? And again, Donald Trump went on the podcast. He spoke for 3 hours. Did he say annoying stuff? Yes. Did he say stupid stuff? Yes. Did he say questionable stuff? Yes. But the thing is, he went on. So that gave the message to the American people that everything we know about Donald Trump is already out in the open. That was the message that was delivered. But the message they got from Kamala Harris refusing to go on the Joe Rogan podcast was them saying, we don't know what she's hiding behind her appearance. And that really caused a lot of the American people to distrust her, and I think was a colossal error for her to make on this campaign. Okay, the fourth thing I put on here about why people preferred to vote for the right this year instead of the left is because the Democratic Party failed to connect with the working American people. Bernie Sanders said it himself, and he said it beautifully. I'm going to quote him. I don't know if I'm paraphrasing, but I'm going to try my best to say it perfectly. It should come to no surprise to the American people that when the Democratic Party abandons the working class American, that the working class American would also abandon the Democratic Party. Again, I paraphrase that. I don't know if I said it perfectly, but it was the general message that he was trying to say. Going back to what I was saying about Kamala's campaign, I really feel that in her campaign, she really failed to connect with the working class people. She made a big attempt to connect to the middle class people, but in my opinion, that's not enough. Because, for example, now I don't know if I'm getting the numbers exactly correct, but I'm pretty sure one of her ideas was to help new homeowners, and she was planning to give a $15,000 contribution to people who wanted to buy a new home, or a $15 tax deduction, one or the other, I can't remember. I could actually be mixing that up with the business owners. I don't have my computer in front of me, and I should, to fact check this one, but somebody fact check me on that one in the comment section about exactly what her plan was there. But I know there was some kind of plan where she was planning to help new business owners, and she was planning to help new homeowners, and she wanted to either give like a large sum of money or a tax deduction of some sort. Now, here's the thing. That might be very helpful to people that already have money, but that's not going to be enough to help people that are so broke that they're going to need more than $15,000 to either start a business or buy a home. You understand where I'm coming from? So that might be great news to people who are already in an economic position to have even more money, that will contribute to a discount on what those people need to do to buy a home or start a business. But that's not going to be nearly enough money to help people who are in serious, dire consequences with their finances. And by the way, I felt exactly the same way about when Biden attempted to help people with student loan debt. Here's the thing. $10,000 sounds great. But the problem is when most people are $100,000 in student loan debt, $10,000 barely scratches the surface. As a matter of fact, it actually sometimes makes it worse, because when you put down $10,000 towards your student loans, the student loan companies actually think that you're in a better financial position, and then they start charging you more. So not only does it not help, but it actually can make things worse because of that. So anyways, that's besides the point. That's like something totally different. But to get back on track where I'm talking about, I don't think trying to connect with just the middle class was good enough. I don't think she did very much to connect with the poor man, with the broke people of the United States. And the thing is, I believe that the middle class margins are actually shrinking right now. If you look at what counts as middle class, it's something along the lines of a family household income of, I believe the bottom part of that is around 50,000 or 56, and the top part of that is somewhere near like, don't quote me exactly on these numbers, but roughly it's like 50,000 to 150,000 is, you know, the middle class. But a lot of people are on the lower end of that middle class to the point where they basically feel like they're the working class. You know what I mean? So I just feel like she didn't really do a very strong job of connecting with those people. And furthermore, to aggravate that, I feel like a lot of her campaign was focused on celebrities, like A-list, like Taylor Swift and, you know, Eminem and all these people, like Hollywood celebrities. But the thing is, again, the average American person who is struggling financially, it's almost an insult to those people, actually, to try to connect these rich Hollywood elite people as part of your campaign to think that they're going to connect with the working class people. It's just unrealistic. And in my opinion, it was a bad idea. It just kind of pushed people away. Okay, the next thing I put on my list here, the fifth thing I put is, this isn't so much a fault of the Kamala Harris campaign. This is more just a social phenomena that has been getting worse and worse every year, in my opinion. Enough to the point where, obviously, based on the results of this election, that enough people in the United States also felt that it was an issue. But to continue on about this, my first point that I made on this episode was about censorship and free speech. There are real accounts of censorship issues going on in the United States right now, meaning the government intervening with people's social media accounts to take down things that they deem as hate speech or offensive, etc. That's actually occurring. But you have this other social phenomena occurring right now where it's not necessarily a breach of freedom of speech because it's not the government doing it, but it's the actual people doing it to each other, where you have people primarily on the left cutting off people on the right. It's literally occurring right now. Like I said in the beginning of the episode, people on the left are cutting out people from the right, divorcing their husbands, refusing to have sex with men, getting rid of their friends, etc., because of their vote. But in my opinion, like I said in the beginning, that's actually just going to make things worse because I think that's actually how we got here in the first place. So it's just going to push things more and more in this direction. For every person that you cut off, it's just going to push them further in their beliefs, and it's not productive. People need to come back together and talk about this stuff, which is what I'm trying to do with this episode. I'm trying to help people understand this side of the story. But anyways, going back to what I was saying, there is this cultural phenomena of people on the left cutting off people on the right. And while it's not a breach of freedom of speech because it's not the government intervening, it sure as hell is pissing the people off. And I can speak from my own personal circumstances that I have had several people on the far left cut me out of their life, not from this election or the videos I posted, but from things that occurred way long ago. And I have a lot of examples, and I could keep listing them over and over, but I'll give you a few. I had a woman in my life who cut me off completely, blocked me on social media, and never talked to me again because I saw a Louis C.K. show several years after the Louis C.K. incident. He was performing publicly, and I decided it was a good idea to see him. And I had a girl completely cut me off because of that. I had a roommate once tell me I was a white supremacist because I listened to the Joe Rogan podcast. And that same roommate posted something on her Instagram where she said, if you support police officers in any way at all, and you have anything positive to say about police officers, then block me. I want to know the scumbag you are, reveal yourself, and I want to be cut out of your life completely because I don't want to be associated with something like that. But the thing is, that puts a lot of just regular American people who are in the center in this really confusing position where it's like, okay, well, I don't want to completely cut off police officers because I need police officers to do things in my life when I need them. Like for example, when my car was stolen, I had a car stolen in Philadelphia. I needed to call a police officer and file a police report so that I could make an insurance claim. Like just things like that happen all the time. And if I'm being pressured against a wall, like fuck you if you support police at all, I'm going to be like, all right, well, I'm just going to go this way because that seems too extreme. I don't agree with the things going on here, but that's too much for me, you know? So stuff like that is just pushing America in this direction. I think people are really disillusioned by this pattern that's happening. And if you haven't seen it occurring over the years, you sure as hell should start seeing it now because it's only getting worse and worse. And I mean, the list goes on. I had a guy who I interviewed on my podcast, he unfollowed me on Instagram because I work out and build muscle at the gym, and that building muscles is a part of the patriarchy, which makes no sense because I'm a fucking woman and I wanted to build muscles in my glutes and my legs and etc. So I had that occur. I had a perfectly good bandmate completely drop out of my band because I listened to Jordan Peterson, who I love Jordan Peterson's work. I don't agree with all his political beliefs, but his work literally helped me get out of a depression and helped me not kill myself. Yet I had a perfectly good bandmate leave my band because I listened to Jordan Peterson. Meanwhile, I've been nothing but completely nice to this person. Every time they showed up, I would greet them with like a glass of water and food. I took really good care of him. I always paid him first before I paid myself. I treated him with so much love and respect, and he left the band. And by the way, we had fantastic musical chemistry, but he left the band because I liked Jordan Peterson. I'm going to try to calm down my anger now because I did think it was important for the people to get the power back in their hands and talk to each other. But when I'm reviewing these things in my head, it's really hard not to feel angry by some of these incidences. And again, like I said, every single one of the incidences that I'm talking about were all from people on the far left. I have never, ever had one single friend on the right, and I have friends on both sides of the political spectrum. I have never had one single friend on the far right cut me out of their life because I've said something that was a far left idea. And I have some far left ideas, and I've talked about it with these friends, and yet not a single one of my friends on the right have cut me out of their life because of that. So again, you know, we could point fingers, but I do genuinely think some accountability here needs to be taken, that there is some cultural phenomena going on right now where people are cutting each other off politically, and a lot of this is coming from the left. And it's really interesting because when I think about this, it's almost like a chicken or the egg situation. I don't know where this cultural phenomena began. Like, how far back in history did this start, you know? And it's like the chicken or the egg. Was it the American people that started getting aggravated and cutting each other off? And then the public media and news channels and YouTube channels, etc., started picking up on it, and then they kind of just fed each other? Or was it the politicians? Was it the political parties that started putting these ideas on social media as clickbait, and then these ideas started getting infiltrated with the American people, and then that snowballed? I feel like it started somewhere, and it's really hard to detect if it started with the people or if it started with the media companies. But either way, it's spiraling completely out of control, and I think we need to rein it in and start calming down and talking to each other about our political differences. Okay, lastly, the last thing that I put on here as a reason why the American people chose to vote red this year as opposed to blue, and why so many people voted red this year, is because of the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Now, this isn't anybody's fault. Let me make that clear. I'm not saying the Democrats tried to assassinate Donald Trump and it's their fault. I don't know the backstory completely of who the person was who tried to assassinate Donald Trump, so I'm just going to assume it was a crazy teenager. So by the way, I'm not making this point as it's any fault of the Democratic Party. It could be if you get into some conspiracy land, but just for the sake of this video, I'm going to assume that it was just a crazy teenager. Even with it being a crazy teenager, that whole incident really got people on Team Trump and hyped up about Trump for so many different reasons. For one, the religious people got really hyped about him because the way the bullet grazed his ear and he just turned his head in the right moment. Now, people who are religious are going to think that was an act of God. So you have his already religious followers, some of them that might have been too lazy to vote. Now they're really hyped up because they're thinking like, oh my God, this was an act of God to save him. And now they're thinking Trump was the Messiah sent from God to save the planet. I just want to let you guys know I don't believe in that, but I do think a lot of people who are religious especially do. And because of that, some religious groups who might have stayed home originally, like the Amish people, etc., now they're hyped up and they're all coming out to vote this year because of that. In addition to that, I think the people who aren't those religious types, it still influenced them to vote for him because, again, it got some conspiracy theory started that this was somehow set up from the left. Like I said, I don't know what the truth is or if there is any legitimacy to these conspiracies, but besides that, people who do believe that there is some conspiracy in the situation lost trust in the left and then moved right. And even the people who don't believe in conspiracy in that situation when they saw his reaction of him getting back up and saying fight, a lot of people saw that as a sign of strength, which also pushed them to vote for Donald Trump this year. Okay, so those are my main talking points. You know, the list could keep going, but just to keep this episode from not lingering on too long, I kept it at those 6 points. Again, like I said in the beginning of this episode, I really think right now more than ever, it's up to the American people to rein things in and talk to each other. I'm sure I'm going to lose some support from this podcast for illustrating some of the things that I did, because I know some people have this opinion that if you voted for Trump, you're a traitor, you don't stand for women's rights, etc. But again, because of a lot of the things I illustrated in this episode, I don't think that's the case. I do think some of those people exist. I do think some sexist, racist people exist. But I think an alarmingly large amount of the people who voted for Trump are just regular people who, like I said, some of them are gay, some of them are black, some of them are Hispanic, women, white, everything across the board right now voted for Trump, and not because they're sexist, racist, homophobic, etc., but because of some of the things I illustrated. And again, I think censorship being one of the biggest reasons. People also view censorship as a really serious right to violate. And because of that, people were put in this very uncomfortable position where they had to choose between women's rights or freedom of speech. And it appears to me that a lot of people chose freedom of speech as an equally important right as women's rights. If anything I said today upsets any of my listeners and it causes them to not want to talk to me anymore, I mean, I can't stop that from occurring, but I just want to let everybody know that I love all my listeners and I want nothing more than unity in this time and not separation. So again, that's it. That's all I have for today, the Pranzata Podcast, episode 135. Feel free to comment on anything I talked about today. And if you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to hit subscribe. It is my mission to become a full-time podcaster, and every single subscriber helps me to reach the goal of that mission. That's it. Have a good day, guys. Bye.